For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vince Caiozzo. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery and also Physiology and Biophysics. And I head up the education program within the Institute for Clinical and Translational Science. And we run a program for, basically it's a career development program that supports junior faculty, postdocs, and pre-docs. And one of the really cool things that has happened to me is the involvement in this program and getting to meet a number of fantastically talented young individuals who are the individuals who are going to be basically defining the science in the years to come. And along those lines, one of the true privileges I've had is to get to know Donovan. Donovan came to UCI back in 2019, which is kind of hard to believe that so many years have gone by already. But over the course of the time, you know, from the get-go and talking to Donovan, it was clear that he was really a very thoughtful individual. He had great ideas, was very interested in helping out other individuals, very giving of himself. And just to give you a little bit of background about Donovan, he actually started out in bioengineering at Cal Lutheran University, which is up in Thousand Oaks. And that's an interesting connection for me because at one time I was recruited to go play football up there at Cal Lutheran. So Cal Lutheran was very small then. It's still pretty small, but a great school, actually. And then from Cal Lutheran, he ended up going to UC Riverside, where he got his PhD in bioengineering. But really, the main thrust of his thesis was to take a look at endocannabinoids and diet-induced obesity. From there, he then matriculated to UCI, is working in the laboratory of Dr. Kalpana Gupta, who's a phenomenal investigator and very, very strong proponent of promoting diversity, as we are as well. Donovan has built a fantastic CV. He's got many publications, and he's got a very, very long list of awards, very prestigious awards. He's got awards from the Ford Foundation, from NIDA. He won a very prestigious Giannini Award, which is really a fantastic award. Which is his most recent award, at least that I know of. And preceding that, he also received the UC President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Award. And from my perspective, this is just a phenomenal opportunity for anybody who qualifies for that. And it provides some really nice, not only support, but benefits in terms of a accelerated way into potentially the UC Irvine. And one other thing I want to mention about the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program is that it's networked across the country with multiple outstanding academic institutions. So with that, Donovan, I'm going to turn on over to you. And of course, we're looking forward to hearing this. And one other thing I should mention is that once we're done, we're going to have a panel discussion. And the panel discussion will include Dr. DeQuina Nicholas, who's a faculty member in the School of Biological Sciences. We've got Atena Zahedi, Dr. Atena Zahedi, who's in the School of Medicine. And then we've got Chuli Uloa, who's also in the School of Medicine. And so each of them is also a recipient of the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Award. So with that, Donovan, we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments on this fantastic award.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Caiozzo, for that extremely kind introduction. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be here to talk with everyone. I'm always happy to discuss this program because it really is it can be life-changing and truly transformative for anyone's career. The UC University of California President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program, I will call it the PPFP for short throughout, It's a fantastic program aimed at postdocs transitioning or wanting to transition to faculty. I'll go into some of the details behind the program, where it started, what it aims to do, who's eligible, all these details. But really what I'd like to ask is for anyone who has specific questions, to please write them down, hold them, because we do have a fantastic panel, and I think their experience and perspective would definitely give a lot more insight than just my own. So I definitely encourage you to ask questions, but please to hold them. With that being said, I'll dive right in if this will let me advance. I'd also like to point out that the Office of Inclusive Excellence will be hosting their own program discussing the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program. So I highly recommend attending that. That will be October 2nd. It's a Tuesday from 2 to 3 p.m. And we'll circulate these slides so that everyone will be able to use this link to register. But I highly recommend Dr. Sharon Block will be leading that webinar, and she'll be able to provide additional details. And I believe they will have their own panel as well. So the more perspectives you can get on this award, like any application, the more eyes, the better. But with that, I'd like to just jump right in and describe a little bit of what this award aims to do. Apologies. And its main goal is to provide the research opportunity and career development for those who have otherwise been described as underrepresented or not really seen in academia. So it's aiming to enhance diversity, and this is primarily through the University of California. The award dates back to 1984, and again was primarily aimed at encouraging outstanding women and minority PhD recipients to pursue academic careers. Now the program has expanded, and all individuals at the postdoc level and at the late graduate student level are encouraged to apply at a UC campus. And this award provides a research fellowship to offset costs, as well as professional development and faculty mentoring opportunities. These provide service, research support, as well as professional development that help contribute to an individual's professional development for their own career, but also with the goal of helping to give back and enhance the UC as a whole. And we'll go into some of the metrics for how we observe success in this program and how it contributes to the UC and the broader scientific community. So what this award provides, salary starting at approximately $60,000 depending on field and experience, and this is determined at time of award. And there's also an additional $5,000 stipend provided annually, and those are helped to provide for research, professional development costs, material supplies. Additional benefits include health, vision, dental, which are mostly standard for postdocs, but this is woven into the fellowship as well. So as a recipient, you do get all these benefits: paid sick, maternity leave, and paid time off during the fellowship term. And one of the things that this award provides the most, and we'll discuss this in a lot more detail later, is the UC faculty hiring incentive. And this is one of the main mechanisms by which this award promotes people into these faculty positions to then continue the tradition of enhancing support and diversity through the UC. Now, each award is eligible for a renewal, typically at the end of the first year, and we'll usually only get one renewal. And that's based off evidence of productivity that you're making progress towards the research that was proposed in your application, as well as participation in the program events, which are held throughout the year. These things are all laid out pretty plainly in the UC OP Office of the President website, where it describes this, and the link below, or is shown below as well. But to quickly go over it, these include an annual fall meeting, which is kind of a welcome, a kickoff, if you will, for the new fellows, as well as an academic spring retreat, which offers a chance for fellows to come together, share their research, and get critical feedback, both from people within and without their field. So it's really helpful, especially with trying to gain new ideas and even develop those collaborative communications early on. I definitely have made quite a few friends, even through Zoom and during the pandemic, just through these interactions. So it's really great, especially since sometimes at the postdoc level it can feel a bit isolating. Building a community around you of like-minded fellows, even if they're in different fields, is incredibly helpful. But what are the requirements of this award? Who's considered eligible and who can apply? These are a few of the main guidelines. Again, the full list can be found on the PPFP website, but primarily fellows are expected to establish residence at their campus that they've chosen, and we'll describe the application in a bit more detail. But typically, fellows will need to pick a site, a UC campus, when they are preparing their application, and that will kind of be a through line throughout. I know a question had come up whether individuals can apply to multiple campuses or multiple labs. We'll go into more detail about that later, but in general, a one-size-fits-all application generally won't work. If you are applying to multiple campuses, each one will usually require its own tailored application, but we'll discuss that in more detail as well. The second stipulation is that during the tenure of your fellowship, you will need to focus full-time on research and generally avoid other commitments. Now, within the PPFP office, they are incredibly helpful, and the administration and even the director of the program, Dr. Mark Lawson, they're very understanding to people's individual circumstances. So this is not a fine line that can't be crossed. There's always wiggle room, and it's just something to be discussed with the program officers. In addition to completing these tasks, fellows are expected to meet regularly with their faculty mentor, though that's pretty standard for advancing in research, especially at this mentored phase, but just ensuring that that's part of the plan, and to attend these PPFP professional development programs that I had mentioned on the previous slide. The other eligibility criteria is for applicants to hold their terminal degree. Usually it's the doctorate of some sort. MFA also is considered if you're pursuing arts as your discipline. But these will usually need to be in hand by the time the award is given, not necessarily when the award letter comes out or even when the application is submitted. So people aiming to complete their degree and knowing that they want to go down this route are highly encouraged to apply if the timing will work out well. And lastly, successful applicants must present work authorization forms just to show they are legally authorized to work in the United States, though this program does offer opportunity for visa sponsorship. But I would recommend anyone interested in pursuing that route to discuss it with the international scholars or International Scholar Affair office at their host campus or where they're intending to apply. They'll provide the most updated and accurate information. Now, I'd like to quickly show kind of how these awards are broken down, who's getting them and where they're being distributed by discipline. And as you can see within the UC system, UC Irvine, we actually have the second highest number of awards given. Not for nothing, I do think that the efforts taken, such as these, to enhance just the awareness of these programs and to provide peer support are really outstanding at UCI. What I've observed and what I've been part of, I've seen as a really dedicated and concerted effort to make sure that people are really reaching as high as they can. As you can see I think this is from the 21-22 cycle, there was only one life science award, so I'm hoping that that number will creep up, but this will just vary by year and the applicants for that cycle. Generally, the way that the awards break down is a little less biased per subject. Now, I want to go into a little more detail about what the hiring incentive entails and why that is such an attractive feature, especially for individuals hoping to stay in academia, which I hope at least a few, if not most of you are. The hiring incentive, which actually started pretty recently, 20 years ago in 2003, provides up to 5 years of support for salary or other hiring needs to the UC campus that hire the current and former UC presidents and chancellors postdoctoral fellows. And we'll describe the chancellor's fellowship a little bit later as well, but this hiring incentive applies usually just as well. So what this does is it creates a pathway where individuals who've received this award, and again, it says since 1996, so even if you're a recipient years ago, if you're receiving your first UC campus tenure track appointment offer, then this award can be activated. And I should say that means even current fellows, if you are to accept a position elsewhere and then decide to return to the UC 5-10 years down the line, these funds will remain there and present, so you can activate them at the time that you return to start that tenure track position at a UC. So the flexibility that this awards is really invaluable. And to anyone who started kind of looking down that route, seeing where these opportunities can take them, you'll know that the flexibility is a major asset and definitely a strength especially when starting those negotiations. Um, as far as physically or not physically, discreetly, what that hiring incentive entails, those 5 years of support are an $85,000 sum to be given each year for 5 years, a total of $425,000. And again, these don't necessarily need to be discreetly used for salary. I know some individuals, when they start a position, may already have salary support through an existing NIH grant or other type of support. And when that's the case, these funds actually are given to the faculty member to be used at their discretion. So they can even be applied to startup costs, helping offset other costs in the lab. So that flexibility, again, not only in when the funds are received, but how they can be administered, really helps to set the groundwork for hopefully a productive career by giving new appointees, new faculty members, the momentum to start up a lab and to successfully get going, since usually that startup portion can be the most turbulent and challenging. So the support provided there is really helpful. But in terms of additional support, the UC Office of the President also provides fellowship recipients with support during the hiring process and for negotiating terms with their chosen campus where they'd like to be hired. And they actually provide instructions to fellows. I won't go into too much detail for how to reach out to the office to sort of begin that process. And they make it so that you are guided throughout, so that you don't feel lost as you're trying to navigate those waters, which for most everyone in that boat will be learning as they go. And one major strength of this mechanism is that it does also provide a waiver to allow for hiring during freezes. Now, especially given the last few years and just the enormous challenges imposed on the academic infrastructure with COVID-19 and all associated fallout, it's been really difficult, especially for individuals looking to move forward. So having this support, knowing that even when times are difficult, will be really helpful. And more importantly, this also helps to provide support to make you more competitive for other awards. And that is to say that the support provided, the structure given, and the team that you build around you for this really kind of gives you a nice springboard to help you with applying to other awards. I can say for certain that having gone through this process, even prior to knowing whether my application had been funded, provide me a solid foundation, since this was at the beginning of my postdoc, which allowed me to then have my thoughts organized and an experimental plan that was able to give me a very nice solid research project. And then by the time the news of this award had come through, things were already on their way. So also not for nothing, it's a good exercise, and I always encourage everyone to apply and write as much as possible. The invisible benefits are definitely there. Apologies. Sorry, just checking the tab. So we will address some of those questions at the end for sure. Now, looking into how these hirings happen, how they occur both at the PPFP, and I mentioned the Chancellor's Postdoc Fellowship Program as well. Like I said, we'll discuss that a little bit more, but it is an option for individuals also applying for the PPFP. But the goal of this slide is to show that hiring of PPFP and Chancellor's Fellows is continually maintaining a pretty steady course. You can see in 2022, there was a slight decline from 2021, but I think that's also offset by the fact 2021 showed a very steep increase in hires. So the 2023 numbers are still preliminary. As you can see there, we're only in September, and these were reported as of June. So if that's to be believed, then we're already about halfway to where we would expect to see the hires. So this is just to show that the UC is still committed to supporting this program, and that across the campuses there is definitely an effort, and PPFP fellows are being sought after for these positions. And I'd like to kind of slowly go over this graph, since it can be a little tricky with the different lines, but this is to show that the average number of fellows being awarded, and you can see that in this blue dotted line, is steadily increasing. But as the number of fellows that we are awarding is increasing, the number of UC hires, which is shown in the darker orange line further below, is similarly increasing. suggesting that we're not just giving these fellowships out and wanting people to then fend for themselves, that the UC is making an effort to bring all these additional fellows into the professoriate. And that's represented more or less by the ratio of the two. That percentage is indicated in that yellow bar. Seeing how it's maintaining an almost flat line indicates to us that the ratio of hires to the number of fellows being awarded is staying relatively flat. So hoping that if all is going well, we're still matriculating as many faculty members as we are fellows, hoping to get as many of the leaks in this pipeline plugged up as possible. Really trying to get as many people that are talented and exceptional into these positions. But these are just some of the numbers showing how the program is also monitoring its efficacy and checking on an annual basis to see where improvements can be made. So even as people applying, as you're seeing the program, or even if you're discussing with current fellows, I always recommend think about what this program does well, but also where it can improve. Dr. Mark Lawson and the staff over at the UCOP that manage this are incredibly receptive to feedback, and they're very, very kind individuals who love to discuss. So any of that will definitely be well received, and I highly encourage everyone to be critical of these programs so we can help to make them better as we can. And then lastly, this is a look at the distribution of the hires by campus over a 5-year period from 2018 to 2022. And you can see similarly, UC Irvine is also leading the pack here. We really seek out these individuals, and I think we'll have quite a few perspectives to hear from today from after making that jump to faculty. So I think I will also be very excited to hear how that process went and what it's like. But just to show that UC Irvine in particular is very committed to these efforts, and that your attendance here and these programs in general are just indicators that hopefully we are moving in the right direction to help improve the quality and the really the inclusiveness of our professoriate and our educational body. So like I'd mentioned, the Chancellor's Fellowship I want to go into just briefly. This is something that was established fairly recently. This is meant to be sort of an adjuvant to the PPFP in the sense that while we have this program that's been incredibly successful, we still are limited in the number of awards that can be given out. So the Chancellor's Award were set up by the individual UC campuses, and each of these is administered on a campus specific basis. But essentially the Chancellor's or CFP program provides a very similar set of benefits as the PPFP, though they are usually restricted to the campus where the CPF is or CFP is awarded. For instance, if you were to apply for the PPFP at UC Irvine, but your award was not selected for the fellowship, but it was still ranked as a finalist, then from then on, your award would then be cascaded to a second review committee for this CFP for your campus, so for UCI specifically. And then that second pool will then be reassessed and then potentially awarded the Chancellor's Fellowship, which will provide nearly all the same benefits as a PPFP, though my understanding is that the hiring incentive may be restricted to the campus that provided it. But I will want to confirm that. So I will also want to ask some of the faculty members if they've had experience with the CFP mechanism. Like I said, you're rolled into consideration for this automatically if you submit a PPFP, so there's no additional application. And I think that the instructions for this are also given during submission, so it's not too surprising, but this is a really fantastic mechanism that overall increases the number of awards given without having to increase the burden of writing additional grants for the applicants. That being said, multiple applications can be submitted, and this is something I had mentioned very briefly early on. You can submit to multiple UC campuses. As well, there are affiliates through this coalition known as the Partnership for Faculty Diversity, which is initiated by the University of Michigan and the University of California. And there are about maybe a dozen other campuses across the United States that also participate. Their full list can be found at the link below. But for instance, if you are very interested in this mechanism and the benefits that the PPFP awards, but you know for certain that a faculty mentor or the type of research you want to do is only available at a different campus, it's well worth it to check to see if they are involved in this program and what resources can be provided now to help when applying for that. That being said, if you're already currently at UCI and you're looking to apply, this may not be as applicable. But I do know that we have some individuals finishing their graduate training who are very interested in looking into other opportunities. So I highly encourage looking at this. But I really must emphasize that the one size fits all approach likely will not be the best way to succeed. Each application should be tailored to their individual campus and what that individual mentor will provide. And that will just increase your odds for success. Some of the firm dates that are important to keep in mind, and hopefully anyone can take a screenshot of this if you don't already have it on hand. All applicant materials, so things that you will be submitting yourself, must be submitted online by November 1st, 2023. And like all online application portals, I highly recommend discussing with your grants officer just to make sure they're aware that you're submitting this, just so that there aren't any delays if an award is offered and you can receive that. So now would definitely be a good time to reach out if you're intending to apply. As well, it's really important to just familiarize yourself with these online systems. Oftentimes we can get all the materials prepared, only be blindsided to learn that the online portal requires all the material to be re-input again. It's been a few years since I've submitted through this mechanism, so I don't remember off the top of my head, but I just always recommend check at least a couple of weeks ahead of time to make sure all the information has been completed prior to submission. And then as well, here's where you'll upload your application materials. And this is just re-emphasizing what I had said. A different mentor letter and research proposal will be required for each individual campus, though it is more common for individuals to submit to a single campus. And then it is also recommended, though generally required, to have the sponsorship of a tenured faculty mentor who is usually distinct from your dissertation mentor, especially for those transitioning from graduate to postdoc, who will serve as your primary mentor. And it is important that they are tenured. I know this is a question that had come up prior, but it is possible to have co-mentors, though this may have to be described very, very well in your application materials. Typically, they do make it a firm requirement that the primary mentor be tenured, and that's more just to help ensure higher probability of success for the applicant once they do start their postdoc research. And then finally, 2 additional references must be identified and included, and this should include also the applicant's dissertation advisor. But this is due a month after the primary application materials, so these letters will be submitted separately. Though, again, I recommend reaching out early, especially around the holidays. People can get very busy. So if those can be submitted even sooner, I highly recommend that. So now would even be a great time to start reaching out for those letters. And then the last thing to include are what are these materials that you will want to submit. For anyone who's gone through these application processes, especially with any of the NIH awards, you know that the materials can be quite cumbersome. So for better or worse, the PPFP materials are relatively short, but that means that you will have a very limited space to try to communicate all the materials you want to about not only your research plan, but your credentials to complete it, your mentorship plan with your advisor, and also what your own personal background is and why that suits you for this award. And the description for the really some of the inclusion criteria that they like can be found on the PPFP website, but I think this will be something that'll be nice to discuss a bit more with the rest of the panel. But we will definitely go into more detail. You will also need to provide an updated CV at the time of submission. It's a pretty easy short form document, but highly recommend getting additional sets of eyes. Since it's a fairly straightforward document, it can still be really easy to have minor typos or errors, and it's just better to have each of those little details ironed out before sending out this document. And the last item is a writing sample. Typically, they want a sample publication. So if you publish something during your graduate studies or even something early on in your postdoc studies, it'll be good to demonstrate that just to show one, evidence of publication, location where you're publishing, and sort of the nature of the research that you've done. If you don't have anything that's currently in press or that's been accepted for publication, then unpublished materials are okay. This is just some way for them to see your approach to writing scientific materials. Now, I intentionally put this towards the end. I'd like to then come back to some of the details for how the review process and the evaluation is done. So a bit of a sobering statistic, the success rate for this mechanism is roughly 3.2%. And I believe this was from the 2021-22 cycle, that out of 1,171 applicants, 37 awards were distributed across all the UC campuses. Now, when you combine this with the Chancellor's Fellowships, which are individual to the campuses, the total success rate climbs up to about 6.4, which is about double, which is a lot more, a lot less intimidating. But that's to say that these applicants, they are competitive, but this should not be any reason to dissuade you from applying. All the individuals that are applying are exceptional, and I know that we have quite an exceptional group of people here at UCI. So I think that that these numbers really are not something to be considered when you're applying. It's just always making sure to put your best foot forward. And I think some of the important details for how to do that are included here. You want to keep in mind that how this is being reviewed is going to be a bit different from a study section at NIH, whereas that's a lot more directed towards a particular topic or emphasis. Typically, these reviews will include someone who's likely an expert in your field, but may also include people who are in adjacent fields very similar, or who may represent more of a generalist to your field. So you do want to make sure that when using technical language, that it's still in a form that's accessible and understandable to a generalist within your broad field. And that will also help to convey your thoughts. It's important to help to explain the topic rather than just to show everything you know in your application materials. As well, applicants are also evaluated for accomplishments, the strength of the overall research proposal, and the potential to have a productive career. So a lot of these items can really be explained and described in your various statements. And as a general rule, when providing these short form applications, I always encourage individuals to make sure that your documents, that they coalesce. They don't need to be repetitive in the sense that they have the same materials stated repeatedly, but you do want there to be some sort of through line, something that can give the reviewer a signature of yours, that when they're reading, they know this is this person who's written this background, this is their history, and this is exactly why they're doing this research that is now going to hit or check off all these boxes that we're hoping to fulfill. You do want the documents to sort of hold hands rather than be completely independent. And the last thing that I want to announce is that the announcements will typically arrive in spring, I think around February, March time, but that will vary by year. But just to give you an idea of what the timeline is like. And then typically, I believe awards need to be accepted by that summer, May or June. Now, we'll go into quite a bit more detail here about what the criteria is for each of the documents. Again, these slides will be circulated, so I don't want to read these verbatim. And a lot of this information is on the PPFP website. But just briefly, and to get some, hopefully to stimulate some questions for what can or cannot be addressed in these statements. These are some examples. So for instance, the education and background statement, you'll want to address, again, the potential to contribute to higher education through understanding of the barriers. And one thing that I think can often come into question when preparing these awards, often individuals may ask if they're not a member of one of these groups that's recognized as underrepresented or historically underrepresented in higher education, would they still be eligible to apply? And the answer is, of course, yes. While this award does aim to increase the representation of people who have these experiences, that's not a prerequisite for being able to address them. And and being able to tackle a lot of these issues. And for that reason, a lot of health disparities research, as it relates to many of our fields, would actually fall quite nicely into the mission of this award. So I think when considering the eligibility and the suitability of your project and of your own personal backgrounds to addressing sort of what the PPFP aims to do, I think it does take a little bit of creativity, but most everyone's background can be tailored to trying to help promote these ongoing issues. Because in the end, that's what the PPFP is aiming to do. It's helping to address this disparity. And I think that can be done through individuals from any walk of life. But again, these are some of the examples given just to help sort of spurn some of those ideas onward and help get a good starting point. Another one of the second bullet point is for individuals who can demonstrate a record of academic service. So even your involvement in programs that have aimed to do this is something to highlight. And if it can tie into the research plan, that's also incredibly helpful in helping to create a very cohesive story, as well as showing why your work and your contribution are in line with the PPFP goals. And then the last thing is a record of leadership. That's always going to be really important to address and to show how performing public service or how you're aiming to continue that service is important, because as future faculty, that's something that will be sort of put on display all the time, how your work is contributing overall. So if you can sort of show that you have that background and that desire, that drive in your background statement or an education background statement, then that would go a long way as well. Now, a little more brick and mortar, the research statement. Here, you want to address critical perspectives that come from the understanding of these groups, but also if your research aims to address a lot of these disparities, so especially with health disparities research. And for anyone who's kind of, I know I struggle sometimes with nailing down exactly what falls within that category. I know that through the NIH and through the NSF, there are quite a few bulletins describing what they consider health disparities research. So if just need more of a fine point on that would be helpful, then I recommend seeking out those resources, and I'd be happy to follow up with anyone about that as well. But in general, just trying to address some of these concerns where historically these barriers have been present, either towards individuals or even towards fields of research, and how your specific research either is entrenched in that type of work to help expand that knowledge, or how it may even be aiming to address those barriers. Those things are always helpful. And this can be a bit tricky to address sometimes, especially when our research can be very focused on the bench. So I highly recommend also getting additional feedback for this if you're seeking out sort of just a perspective on how to smooth over that transition. But again, these slides will be made available, so these and other examples can be found. Now, one thing I do want to point out, and these are factors that will need to be addressed in the application that may be extenuating. So it's just good to address them early on, because these may impact consideration for applicants. And these are typically things that will need to be explained. So the first one is currently holding a tenure track faculty appointment. Typically, this may be a disqualifier for individuals, though again, there are instances where this may be appropriate. If that's the case, then this will need to be addressed, but I would recommend reaching out to the PPFP staff early on to determine suitability before taking a lot of time. The next would be to already have possessed significant postdoctoral experience. Now, as long as you are still a UC postdoc, then you are eligible to apply. There's no restriction to having to be within the first or second year. Like I know some mechanisms are limited with that time window. However, the longer you are in your postdoc, I will say the amount of consideration becomes a bit more stringent. So a third-year postdoc, for instance, may not necessarily receive the same consideration as a first-year postdoc, at least in terms of the amount of productivity expected, as well as the development of a research plan. So it is something to be gauged, and I wish there was a bit more of a discrete measure for how those different applications are reviewed. But that is just something to keep in mind, that may affect the way that the application is considered and should be addressed. And lastly, if an individual is considering applying to continue work within the same department or where they're already hired, and this is primarily for individuals who are either at that graduate student or in between level prior to starting a postdoc, that if you are intending to stay in the same lab where earlier training was done, just explaining more or less how further training can be gained from that, because they want to make sure that that this stage is going to be one of growth, and they want it to be really an exponential growth. They want people to jump into these fellowships and really take off running. And the concern, I imagine, is that if you're staying in a similar environment, that the potential for growth may be limited. While that may or may not be the case, this is just something that would need to be addressed if this situation were to apply. And these are all things that the PPFP considers and gives room to address. So none of these are immediate disqualifiers, I should mention. And with that, I have come to the end of all the prepared materials that I have in regards to the fellowship on some of the factors for what goes into it. So I would like to open up the conversation. I have, apologies, I forgot to include some of the credentials for my co-panelists, but I'd like to ask if they'd be able to introduce themselves and if we can start a conversation. So with that, I thank you all for your attention.
Atena, are you there?
Hey guys, I'm here. I hope you're doing all well. Thank you so much, Donovan, for your introduction. I'm also a PPFP recipient and currently working in the Department of Stem Cell Research Center under Eileen Anderson, and definitely would be happy to answer any questions anyone has on this topic. And yeah.
Daquina, how about you?
Yes. So hi, I'm Daquina Nicholas. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Molecular Biology and Biochemistry. I was a PPFP fellow from 2017 to 2019. And then my fellowship finished and I got on the tenure track about a year or so later and was hired here. And we use the incentive heavily. And of course, I could talk a little bit more about how the program will actually advocate for you in that hiring process. Started my job here 2021, so been at UCI for 2 years. My department actually has another PPFP hire, so same process. The department kind of knew what they were doing, so that's the experience that I bring. I'm happy to help get feedback for applications, and then also I blindly review applications for a PPFP program.
Nice. And is Julie on the call yet? Nope.
I don't see Dr. Aloa, but maybe she'll join during the conversation.
All right. So how do we want to work through the questions? You just want to go from those that we've received, Marguerite, or include the chat here as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we can go with the first question that we received. So it looks like the first question was, does the recipient need to terminate their current postdoc appointment and their commitment to it if they get the fellowship?
So this depends on who you applied with. So that fellowship is basically a contract between you, the institution that you applied to be at, and also the mentor that you applied with. So if you're a postdoc in a lab and you applied with that mentor in a specific place, you don't have to terminate anything. If you're supposed to go to a different lab or a different campus with different mentor, yes, you will have to terminate that postdoc to start your new one in order to accept the fellowship. You can't just like transfer it to like where you're at.
Right. I also believe that when you're given the award letter, there is a bit of a window for when you can initiate your award. I believe it's within a fairly narrow time from when the award was supposed to start, which I think is the summer after it being granted. So there's a bit of leeway, but exactly, it would have to be starting fresh.
And then just to clarify, do most applicants apply with the mentor they already have as a graduate student, or how does that part work?
You apply with whoever makes sense. So a lot of people in the STEM field, they will apply for the mentor that they're ready with and in a lab that they've been in for maybe a year, 2 years max. You do see students who are in their final like dissertation year, and you see this a lot in the humanities, where in a dissertation year, they identify a mentor who's agreed to say, hey, we can go postdoc together, let's write this application together. So it can go either way, and I've seen it all the ways, and all the ways can be successful. So whatever makes the most sense for your training and your science, you just want to identify someplace that you can go with a mentor who cares about these issues, who'll support you, write you a really, really good letter, and help you develop the project so it shows that you're a good mentor-mentee pair.
Great, I think that's really helpful. Okay, and then someone was asking if we could discuss the deadlines for the application submission. I think you went over that, Donovan, didn't you?
Yeah, so November 1st, midnight Pacific time is the deadline to submit applicant materials. And as far as mentor materials and letters of reference, that will be December 1st, I believe also midnight.
Great. And then it looks like somebody's asking if we have any examples. And I did mention in the chat that Donovan has shared his application with us, which we will add to the ICTS library. And then also Dr. Nicholas has some additional applications that we will be adding to our grants library. So when we circulate the materials for this workshop, we'll also include instructions on how to access that library. Let's see. Okay, and then it looks like, would you please emphasize on how the partnership program works? I'm interested in applying to work the faculty in University of Michigan. Should I apply at UC PPFP or University of Michigan PPFP program?
Okay, so from my understanding, it's all going to be in the same portal. When you go in the application portal, you would like click that this is for UC like Michigan PPFP, but it's not like, I mean, I guess that's kind of the answer. Like it's all the same portal. You submit all the same types of materials, and then it'll have a place where you can click like this is what I'm applying to is for Michigan. And if you have additional questions, as Donovan mentioned, the office of PPFP with like Mark Lawson directing and all their staff, they are super responsive. Just ask them, they will direct you on what to do.
And just for clarification, Sabrina, so they will have to identify somebody at the University of Michigan, right, to serve as their, yeah, okay.
And Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask your question.
Oh yeah, I had a quick question about the importance of preliminary data in the project proposal. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So a little piece of preliminary data doesn't hurt, but you don't necessarily need preliminary data. One thing to keep in mind is that the reviewers are very, very broad across like their scientific disciplines and backgrounds. You want a concept that makes sense, easy for them to understand and digest, shows impact and significance, but then also shows that you and your mentor are the people who can do it. And that training place is what's going to be able to help you be successful in that project. So it's weird because they don't think of it so much as like an NIH type of project where you got to prove every single concept is doable and feasible. That's not the case. And remember, you only have us for like 2 pages to write this in. And so as you put in the figure, you take up like all your space. So if you use a figure, you want it to be something that gives the overall picture or supports the main like rationale. But other than that, like don't worry too much about preliminary data.
Yeah, for me, it was a little bit interesting because I came from sort of like a, background learning about stem cells, and I was interested to learn then, getting more, experience in vivo project and spinal cord injuries. So it is okay also with the mentor that you're hoping to work under to, discuss with them and sort of show them your, preliminary data that you might have from your graduate work, and then see if there's even in some cases, possibly a little bit of preliminary data from their side could be added that, this lab has the capacity to do this proposed work that you're proposing to do. And then you have this very unique background. So the combination of these two is like the perfect magic to make this new, as exciting project happen. So, don't be afraid also to sort of talk about that with that mentor and sort of, discuss your data, discuss, how their lab is working as well.
What would you say are some of the most important aspects of choosing a mentor?
Yeah, for me, as I mentioned, it was very important that the mentor had the lab had the specific, things that I was looking to learn during this fellowship and my postdoc training. In this case, for me, it was animal surgeries, behavioral analysis, all the things that I necessarily did not have a background in. But I think it would be very important to, again, have those conversations early that, the project is going to be something of interest for you, but also is going to be very helpful for the lab and that professor. So it's going to be like a mutually beneficial sort of project that you could pursue. So like, having those discussions, I think, and having the professor on board and very much understanding of what you want to do, I think is important. Versus, say their name or, so on. So I think, yeah, that's what I can add there.
Yeah, and in my experience for picking mentors, I'd say I consider that as one of the most highly like considered factors. Having a bad mentor can really hurt. And not to say that mentors are bad. Sometimes people just don't always gel. So I think finding one common ground with a mentor who has similar goals, and then making sure those expectations, at least in terms of the length of your program and your training, are established early on. For instance, if you are wanting to go into a faculty position, setting aside 4 to 5 years for that training if needed, and then reeling it in as necessary. I think having that established early on, or if you're looking to do a different trajectory, just making sure that that's laid out plainly, and that it'll help to smooth over things later on, I found.
Great. And it looks like there was a comment in the chat. Just to clarify, a postdoc going into their second year would be okay to apply to stay working with their current primary mentor, or would that be something we should justify and clarify within our own research statement?
I don't think that actually needs to be justified or clarified, especially if it's in STEM. Like, we all know the pace of how STEM research occurs. And honestly, you'll notice many of the STEM PPFP fellows don't actually start at the very beginning of their postdoc. On average, we tend to see these more in applying after their first year, after their second year, as opposed to humanities who will apply right at the beginning of their postdoc. And they tend to have shorter postdocs also.
Awesome. There was a question, can someone apply multiple times, such as applying just prior to graduating with their PhD and maybe applying again the next year if they didn't receive the award?
Yeah, there's no actual limit on applying, right? You can go in as many times as you're eligible.
I actually have colleagues that have applied and not received it on their first submission and have received it on their second submission. So, do not be discouraged if you submit and don't get it your first time.
Do you know if your college received feedback off of that first submission? Or is it kind of blind and they go in again and try to improve it?
So I've actually reviewed applications for this program as well, and I don't think they end up getting, I think that you'd probably have to have like a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Lawson to see if you can, but my understanding is that you don't get that feedback.
Okay, that's my understanding too. I was just like, maybe I was missing something. Okay, cool.
So another question is, if your research is not targeted towards increasing equity, for example, mine is rehabilitation based, how do you suggest targeting it towards increasing equity? Should I discuss how I construct a diverse research team, or does it need to be the research goal itself?
Julie, you want to take it?
So, I work in a lab and I work with bacteria, and my research is not focused on DEI whatsoever. However, the rest of what makes up truly UIOA is very DEI focused, and I'm very passionate about those endeavors and other activities and other things that I participate in. So I think that, you know, we're trying to increase representation in STEM, increase representation at the University of California, and work with individuals that are going to be mentoring, you know, more diverse trainees in their own laboratories and moving forward. And there are different ways that you can contribute to diversity if you're not actually studying diversity itself in terms of in your research.
Okay, thank you so much. And that's exactly the reason I wanted you to answer this. So I want to reiterate that PPFP is about creating UC faculty who care about increasing diversity within the UC system. So it doesn't matter what your background is, what your research is, you want to see that you as a person are going to advance making ethical spaces within our university.
Great, thanks so much for clarifying that. Yes, Andrea, looks like you have a question. Go for it.
So sorry, that was my question. So I'm thinking just in structuring this, would you suggest putting within sort of the educational background that you, like where you do DEI, or would you put it in the research statement itself? Like what part of the application does that fit in?
It fits anywhere it belongs. That sounds like a really weird answer, but if your research and the long-term significance is important for diversity equity, put it at an introduction or a conclusion, right? Of course, you have your, I think there's like a diversity equity statement, it goes in there. In your background statement, if you know how you view diversity and equity is shaped by some of your background or experiences in science or outside of science, that can go there. And very, it's super important that Donovan pointed out, you want all of your documents, as he described, to hold hands. So you do want to have common threads that shows like this is something that you care about, and you find a way to address these issues in any capacity that you have the power to do so.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I think the letters of recommendations, you know, for the strong applicants, they have very strong letters of recommendations that are absolutely complete. And in those letters, they also talk about they're advocating for you, right? And so they're talking about how you contribute to diversity, and that component is included in there. And then also the stronger letters also kind of include a mentorship plan and talk about that as well, which is an important component.
Great, thanks so much, Dr. Aloa. The next question, is it a good idea to mention the name of faculty members at the targeted UC whom we are interested in working with in the research proposal?
I think this is an interesting question. The mentor should be identified, and they will likely need to provide a letter as far as like in terms of naming them in their program. I'd say if they're potentially very prolific, and if they're a name that can be recognized, that may be helpful. But in terms of naming them, I think just within the convention that you want to describe why that research is feasible with that individual. Otherwise, I hope that addresses the question.
Yeah, I almost feel as though I can't say it's bad or good, but the idea of kind of like name dropping, so there's both individuals I want to kind of work with. Because you don't have a lot of space, you can't justify like why you're talking about all these additional people other than your mentor. On top of that, like I said, your reviewers are from very diverse backgrounds, and it's highly unlikely that they'll recognize additional names you just kind of throw in there. And so I would suggest keep it focused on the project, your mentor's qualifications for helping complete it, and your qualifications for doing the work.
Great, thanks so much, Dr. Nicholas. Okay, this next question is 2 parts. How do we proceed if the primary mentor does not have tenure?
You can't. Yeah. Okay, the primary mentor does have to have tenure. That's just one of the stipulations / rules of the fellowship. Yeah, the primary mentor just they have to have tenure. So you can do a co-mentorship situation, but it has to be very clear that that primary mentor is your primary mentor. What some people will do if they have a junior mentor is write the application with the primary mentor and then spend majority of their time in the co-mentors lab, but still have their like follow-ups and evaluations with the primary mentor to make sure they can like have that funding. But primary mentor has to have tenure.
Okay, perfect. Amrutha, I see you have your hand raised and this was your question. Do you want to take it over? Or maybe not. Okay, the second part of the question was, would the teaching experience and service have to be in the US? They're asking as an international scholar.
My understanding is it doesn't have to be. It can be even like as early on as you've had experience teaching. I would incorporate all of those experiences leading up to, your application to really strengthen that component.
Great. Josh, did you want to jump in with your question?
Yeah, I was wondering about if if they have any preference for hypothesis-driven versus descriptive studies.
I mean, not the same way that NIH does.
There you go.
For me, specifically because I wrote like a very research-based proposal, mine did have aims. It had 2 aims specified, but I don't think it is a requirement per se, right? In my case, it just really did make sense to break things down into 2 components. But again, I don't necessarily think you'll be dinged against if it's, especially if it's not in the realm of, biology and these kinds of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I can say is that there's a way that certain people in different disciplines
Right.
proposals are used to seeing proposals, and then so they're biased towards the way they're used to seeing proposals. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're writing.
Thank you.
And then there's a question regarding letters of recommendation. Are they allowed to, are applicants allowed to have, how many letters are they allowed to have?
You're required to have 2 for sure, one being from your dissertation advisor and one from an outside. I don't recall if there's space for a third because I think it's through the submission portal. So it just gives you two areas where you can input that information. But yeah, it's been a little bit since I've seen the application, but that's how I vaguely remember it.
So can I ask a follow-up? Is that okay?
Yeah.
If there is room for 2, is it recommended that you use that? And so I guess what I'm getting at is I did a lot of outreach work, specifically with a professor at my last university. So she's not my primary mentor, but she may be able to speak to that. So would she be a good second, or are they kind of only looking for someone who is your direct like thesis mentor and that's it?
I think that'd be a beautiful second letter.
Okay. Probably over someone on my thesis committee, like to get that second, viewpoint of my work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because you have to be strong for your research. And remember, the goal of the program is to make faculty who care about advancing DEI within the university.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so quick aside. So it was mentioned about how record of leadership is important. Like when we say a record of trying to advance DEI, we mean it. So I have no track record of ever doing anything to ever support anyone ever. And then I come up with this idea saying, I'm going to do this in the future. Like that's not going to fly. We do look for evidence of leadership, participating in programs. It just can't be fluff.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is the length of the fellowship. Is it 1 or 2 years? I've heard from a current fellow that they received 2 years of funding from the start 2023 to 2025, and the UCI email announcement refers to 2024 to 2026 fellowship timeline.
I believe it's 2 years as far as my understanding is.
It's technically 2 years with an evaluation after the first year. So for some reason, like the mentor's terrible, whatever, there's opportunities to like switch mentors. But like if you're just really making no progress and like you weren't who you said you were, then like okay, they're going to end it after the year. But it's 2 years contingent upon like progress after that first year.
Great. So you would recommend writing a research proposal for the 2-year timeline then? Perfect. The next question has to do with the primary mentor. My PI is an associate professor. Is that enough in terms of the requirement? Yes. Perfect. Okay, the next question, is it easy to renew the fellowship during your postdoc? Is making reasonable progress enough to get it renewed?
Yes, it's relatively easy. Like, just do what you're supposed to do and it's fine. You'll get it renewed.
Okay, and then another question in regards to the mentor writing a letter of recommendation. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
but it's not counted as part of those two. It's a third separate letter.
It's a separate thing.
Got it. If after the first year you want to try for faculty, is that supported by the fellowship or is it expected to complete the full 2 years?
When you're ready for a faculty market, get on the market, and they're happy to help you whenever you're ready to go. And then once you get your job, you'll terminate the fellowship and you'll get paid better.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And did you, Dr. Nicholas, did you mention something about the PPFP program helping you negotiate your faculty position?
Yeah, they legit have like a shadow negotiator. So and so like you can give them like, this is the offer, this is what they're offering me, and they will help you negotiate because we don't know what we're doing. It's just a thing. And when in the program you'll learn more about it, but they also help. So say if you apply to a position, anytime you apply ever, you notify the office and they'll go figure out who's the search committee, who's the chair, who's the dean, who's running it, and tell them this is the incentive, this is how it works, and this is what his candidate has to offer. So they will advocate on your behalf behind the scenes.
That's a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I had a quick question about the hiring incentive from Donovan. I believe, if memory serves me correctly, you mentioned that you may have the opportunity to defer the faculty hiring incentive. The rate at which the salary is capped at, would that adjust if the salary cap? I mean, I imagine this is set in place by the NIH limits. If that limit increases or is adjusted, will that amount adjust? Or are you locked in at the rate when you applied and received the fellowship?
So think of the incentive and what you get as your rate for your salary as two separate things. The incentive is a set block of money that they're going to give to the institution to use however they need to support your hire. So they can take the money and they can put it towards your salary. They can take the money and pad your startup. They could take the money and be like, we're just going to hire people in the administrative office, right? It's up to the university how they're going to use those funds, but it helps them to support the hire that they want for you. So whatever you negotiate for your hire or for your salary in that contract when you sign, that's what it's set to. And that's even outside of whatever NIH salaries or caps are. This is dependent on you and that university and that department and what is agreed upon.
Great, thank you so much. Amrutha, I may not be pronouncing your name right, but do you have a question?
Hear me?
Yes, go for it.
So, like I was asking my previous question, my situation was likely it's going to be that I'm applying with a junior faculty and would have somebody as a senior member as a co-mentor. So would both of them have to write separate letters for me, or would that be just one letter from the senior faculty?
Julie, have you seen how the co-mentor applications look?
I've actually not seen it. I've not gone into the portal, so I don't know, sorry.
I'm trying to think. I know one case in particular where I think they were kind of doing like another post back, like their second post back type of thing. This individual got the grant, and you can always do like a joint letter. That's one way. But in this particular individual, they just snuck it in as a one letter recommendation. And then the other one was the proper mentor letter. So it can be done different ways, but I don't think I've seen a co-written letter, but I've seen it the other way where one of them's in there as like a letter of recommendation and the other one is.
I think that's what I've seen too. And then that's how we did mine. My primary mentor was, the primary mentor, and this other person who's going to support was kind of on the side. It's actually not very common to have co-mentors, which I know is like we're telling you can, but it's like it's not common.
So then I have the person who is going to be my primary mentor as the mentor letter, and the other person, the junior faculty whose lab I would be working in, as my recommendation letter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's as long as the junior mentor is tenured, as we mentioned, I think also.
No. So the reason I have a junior mentor is because he's not tenured. So the
right, so I think then in that case, I think then that junior mentor cannot be the so-called primary mentor.
Yeah. So the primary mentor would be a senior faculty who's tenured, but I would spend most of my time in my junior mentor's lab.
Right. Yeah, I think that works.
Dr. Nicholas suggested that I do.
Great. The next question, what was the biggest challenge or most unexpected part of the application process for each of you?
I can go first. I think the biggest challenge really, and I mentioned a little bit of this, was finding a mentor that I really wanted to work with. And just to give a little brief aside, when I was considering postdocs, actually I had really wanted to apply through this mechanism, but I had trouble finding a UC mentor that I really wanted to work with, and I actually didn't have any UC prospects by the time I was already nearing my defense. But through happenstance, I actually managed to meet Dr. Gupta, who I'm working with now, and we really hit it off. It was a great experience, and knowing going into it that this is something we want to apply to, it kind of set the groundwork for everything through finishing my dissertation and starting the postdoc. So I think identifying the mentor was the biggest challenge. Once I did that, the research plan, everything else kind of gelled.
I think what's most difficult for me was writing an original research plan in an area that I had never worked in before, because I was doing a little bit of a field switch for my second postdoc. But I had a mentor who was hands-on and like helped me through the process.
Yeah, for me, it was a little bit, I think, different because I had my dissertation advisor who was very interested to have me stay and apply actually with her. And the key thing for me was to kind of expand and try to sort of go on to a different university and try something new, instead of just kind of being in the comfort zone. And this is why I think, although it's not a disqualification, is typically discouraged for you to stay with your, say, dissertation advisor or whoever that you've been with for a while. So although it was very comfortable for me to, stay in that realm, I think it helped my application that it was a very sort of, in my realm, but kind of in this new area with the new faculty that really had that experience. So yeah, don't be afraid to kind of look outside the box a little bit.
I think for me, it was just succinctly and effectively writing a 2-page research proposal. So that's probably, this grant's a little bit shorter than your typical grant. So I think that probably was the most challenging.
Josh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, I know, Donovan, you mentioned that a third-year postdoc applicant may be held to a different standard than a first year or a second year. In my situation, it may be similar for others. I did a year postdoc in my graduate lab, in the lab I did my graduate studies in. Then I switched over and started in a new lab on a different topic. So I was wondering, do you know if they count that year where you're working with a different PI? They're only counting the amount of time you've been in the lab of the advisor for the application?
They count both your total time as a postdoc, but of course take into consideration the fact that you're in a new lab. So it makes sense because I also applied, like I already had 2 years of postdoc experience, so I was a third-year postdoc applying. So it's very clear if there was something completely new, and that matters. And as I mentioned, this program, well, actually I didn't mention it. Donovan, this program first set up, and initially it was only open to like humanities PhDs. And then the STEM degrees were added in later. So some of the metrics and like thoughts behind how everything is set up is because PhDs or postdocs for humanities is a little bit shorter. So in their mind, someone in the third year is applying. Why would they apply when they should be on faculty market? And so they're basically looking for people who need more time as a postdoc, necessarily somebody who's ready for faculty market right then and there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. The next question, is there a disadvantage in staying in the same university but a different lab?
Not from go ahead.
No, go ahead, Takayuki.
Yeah, so not from what I've seen. In the olden days, it used to be a little bit taboo, like, oh, you need to go somewhere new and spread your wings. But they see a different lab, different mentor, different area of research, different expertise. You know, you're getting an entirely different experience than you did in your graduate studies. So I think that's what's most important, is showing that you are adding breadth to your research experience, and whatever you're adding is helping you move towards a faculty position.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that too, especially if it's a different lab. I don't think that that would be counted against in any way possible, and it should not.
I have a question just in general. How much time would you give yourselves to put together this application? What do you think is adequate?
Other people who did it a lot more recently say.
It'll definitely depend on your writing style and also your mentor's kind of expectation, how quickly they can get things back to you. I'd say I usually recommend at least a couple months for any sort of application, just to have enough time to even conceptualize it, get it all together, do all that. If you're working with an advisor you've worked with before, you have existing documents, materials you can work from, that can be truncated a bit. But you really just need enough time to get a solid plan, and especially to seek out those letters. That's a big one, being considerate of other people's time.
Great. Were there any other questions from participants?
I have a quick question. For the research proposal, it is really short, it's a limited amount of space. Are we allowed to have tables and or figures in a limited way? Is that allowed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, at least when my application was evaluated, I don't think references cited and even a figure legend that I'd included, that wasn't factored into the word limit. So that did give me a little extra wiggle room. I would double check the requirements just to make sure that's all still above board, but I remember that did help a little bit.
Great. This was a pre-submitted question, but I think it's a good one. Is the typical applicant someone who A, has already arranged a faculty mentor for their postdoc but hasn't started, B, is in the process of finding a postdoc, or C, has already started a postdoc?
A and C and not B.
Right.
Yeah, the advisor is really heavily involved in this whole process. So if one hasn't been identified, then it kind of makes the rest difficult.
Got it. Andrea?
If we've applied previously, is there any way to get access to the feedback they may have given us, or is it like they don't give it out even if you ask or contact the department?
I don't know. I would just ask and see. Like it can't hurt to ask.
Okay. Okay, so there's not like a specific policy that's like, we do not give this to students. Okay.
Awesome. I only saw one additional question. I don't think that got asked from previous, which was for someone who's currently maybe 2-3 years out from graduating. They had asked how to prepare. And the only thing I would say is start trying to identify fields of research and mentors for the postdoc level that you want to work with. That's plenty of time to try to arrange a meeting at a conference or even over Zoom. Yeah, just start laying that groundwork early.
Great. And Martha, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes. So this is for Dr. Nicholas, because she said that her situation was similar to my mentor situation. Would you be able to please expand a little bit on how you found the person you chose as your senior mentor, and how did the whole process of applying and working later with them work out for you?
Okay, yeah. So my mentor, I met him like while I was in graduate school, and I wanted to do a postdoc with him, but he was like, at the time, not sure about the funding, you should probably look for other mentors. And I did. I went somewhere else for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I come to find out my mentor was going to move, and I was like, okay, I'm not moving to Kentucky with her. So I reached back out to this mentor, and he was like, hey, we can apply for the PPFP fellowship. So it's not that this person was junior, it's that they had a conflict of interest with the program. And then they said, okay, we have to identify a different primary mentor for you. So he went to figure out who would be the best primary mentor for the project that I was actually proposing. And we literally sat down. I came to UCSD, I interviewed with my primary mentor, like got to know her, met some of the people in her laboratory, and then wrote the application one-on-one kind of with my real primary mentor. And then once that was done and complete, we basically went over it with my shadow mentor, the one who's the senior or the primary mentor on this application. And then she took the time to write a really, really strong mentor statement with me, giving her the information that she needed to write a really strong letter for me. And then so once I got the fellowship, I was basically 100% in the junior member's lab, wasn't junior, in the other mentor's lab. My primary mentor, I meet with and do like my IDPs, my annual follow-up. She would give input on my research. She's literally on all my papers because she helped me like with some experimental design. So just because you have a senior person who isn't necessarily a person you spend most of your time in, they should still be just as committed to you as that the fake primary person who is with you 100% like day to day in their laboratory. And so use the, I guess, wisdom of the person whose lab you're going to be in for them to identify a senior member that will take the time to also mentor you. You don't want it to be a senior person that you're putting on just for like looks. It should be somebody that's also involved in your success.
Can they be from a different department or a different UC?
Same UC, different department, I think is okay.
Okay.
You're applying for a specific campus and you need to have residents at the campus you apply to.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, Andrea, go for it.
I know we'll get good examples of like the research statements and the background. Are there any like examples of a good mentor statement or something that we can share with our mentor for what might make it more competitive, or is that not available?
I don't. So I sent all the components to Margaret that has all the ancillary documents, but for the mentor statement, you're probably not going to be able to get your hands on a good example. So truly, you did a really good job of kind of highlighting important parts of that mentor letter. Would you mind going over that again and just kind of bullet pointing what we expect to see out of a really strong mentor letter?
Yes, and I was actually going to try to pull one up right now so I could just kind of highlight. I think there, in mentor letters that have been written on my behalf, actually, that I've been able to see, there's kind of even, sometimes I'll see it where it's divided into different sections, and it can be a section like Chuli's Dr. Ulloa's contribution to diversity or increasing diversity, like literally like even like a section on there that kind of goes through. And then things like, and then there are like different sections like mentorship, right? Like the mentor sometimes can also highlight their success as a mentor, right? So my mentor often highlights, like I've mentored 5 other UC, postdoctoral fellowship program postdocs, so they'll highlight their mentoring track record. So that's one section. And then the mentor can highlight, how often they're going to meet, some of the ancillary activities that you'll be participating in terms of research conferences or local seminars for your own career development that you're going to be participating in locally at the institution. So I think those are some of the highlights. So the mentorship track record can be highlighted, and then kind of the one-on-one mentoring and ancillary activities, and then also kind of your broader contributions to DEI.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to add, it's always great when your mentor adds in your potential to become independent and run your own lab. Like when you're writing this research proposal, was this all your ideas, or did they, give you a project and have you like fill it out? So they want to see someone who's going to develop into UC faculty. So anything that they can say to attest to the fact that you are this driven, independent scientist who came into the lab with her own ideas, and I can't wait to support her develop so she can get to the place she wants to go. You want your mentor to say that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Were there any other questions? No? Thank you so much, Donovan. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much to our panelists for your contribution. I think it was very helpful.
Yeah, great job. Great job. Great input. And thanks to all of you for attending. Wonderful questions as well.
Oh, one thing I failed to mention is that we will be sending an evaluation for this. If you could take just a few minutes to fill out the REDCap quick survey and give any feedback, anything you'd like to see in the future. We're always grateful for that. So thank you all.
If I can provide one last tip, it would
Sure.
just be get as many eyes on your materials as possible, especially early on. I'm notorious, so maybe people won't want to hang out with me, but for bringing a written or printed statement to like dinner with some friends, and I'll just ask, hey, can you read this real quick? Again, won't make you very popular, but it'll help just to get lots of eyes. So I highly recommend it.
Great.
Great suggestion.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks.